Hello, I'm Jacob from El Paraiso Records. This is Doom and Stone Latin America. See you guys.
Hola, bienvenidos a Doom and Stone Latinoamérica. Mi nombre es Román Tamayo y es un placer estar con todos ustedes. El día de hoy tengo el privilegio de entrevistar a uno de mis personajes favoritos de esta escena psicodélica desde Dinamarca. Tenemos a Jacob, él es parte de la banda Causa Sui, el Paraiso Records y Edena Gardens. Tiene también discos de solista increíbles, así que vamos a platicar con él. Hay mucho que preguntarle. Yo soy muy fan de toda la movida en Dinamarca y para mí el Paraiso es uno de los mejores sellos que existen actualmente. So, hello Jacob, welcome to the show.
Oh, gracias. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, it's my pleasure. Well, as I say, I'm a big fan of all your projects, Causa Sui, El Paraiso Records, Edena Gardens, and your solo album. So I have a few questions about all these projects. So let's start. So the first question for you is tell us about the first days of Causa Sui, how the project was born, and how was the local psych scene in Denmark in those days?
Yeah, well, I started the band with Jonas, who I also run El Paraiso Records with, and we had an electronic band that we played with for a few years. But at that time, we thought that electronic music was getting a little bit boring, especially playing it live. So we sort of decided to have the same members in that band start like a new band. And the Danish scene, that was around 2003 or four, I think. And there was a lot of garage rock at the time, but not that much like psychedelic music. There was Baby Woodrose and On Trial as the only bands in Denmark who sort of did that thing where they both had heavy riffs, and so we sort of decided, we can do something else like that. And bands in Germany like Color Haze were just starting out, and we heard those guys, and that was a big inspiration to get into it, because we always listened to psychedelic rock like Hendrix, but also stoner rock like Caius. So for us, it was sort of a revival of what we've been listening to for 10 years, to be able to play it ourselves. And we sort of missed that no bands were playing that. So that's one of the reasons why we started it.
After 17 years on the road, how do you feel at this point of your career, guys?
I think we're very relaxed about it. I mean, we don't rehearse regularly, and we haven't done so for the past, I don't know, 10 years or something, because we live in different cities, but also we are so established, and we've been playing together since, I guess, like three of us since we were 12 years old, maybe like a little earlier, actually. So we always played together. So it's very easy, even though we haven't played for 6 months or a whole year, then we can just sort of pick it up and just keep playing from where we left it off. So at this point, I think we are not in a rush to do anything. We just do the stuff that we want to do, and having our own label, we're able to sort of control every aspect of that, because we sort of worked ourselves into a place where we record our own music, but we also produce it, and we also make the covers, and we also release it. So we sort of own the whole chain, and we always wanted to never have anyone else interfere with the ideas that we have. So it's not like we have someone saying, oh, you should change this, or you should have this different font on the label, or, we sort of own everything ourselves. So that's a nice place to be, where you just have total freedom to create whatever you want, and you don't have to worry about what anyone besides people in the group thinks.
Wow, that's amazing. Freedom is everything. And in the case of Causa Sui, the sound is very unique. It's a fusion between jazz, psych rock, crowd rock, and maybe stoner rock. So how's the process of composition, and how is the process of record the albums in general for you guys?
I mean, we always recorded all the albums ourselves, but for the first couple of albums, we did it in like a rehearsal space, where we had to set up everything. We had to record. We had to spend a lot of time setting up the microphones and setting up the computer and sort of figuring out the sound. But then before the album returned to Sky, we had an offer to move into a studio that someone had built. And he said, I'm moving to another town. You want to take over this place? And Jonas, who produced music full time, he also does some electronic music and a lot of mastering and mixing. He said, we should move down there. And we just moved our instruments into this studio. And since then, it's just been standing in the studio. So now we just record every time we play, we press record. So we always have a recording of what we did that's very good quality. And actually on the last album, the Psicodelica, we ended up using a lot of the stuff that we actually just thought were like jams, or like, this is just an early take of this. And then when we listened back to it, we said, we shouldn't try to recreate it, because we did something special in that version. And re-recording it would take months and months of work. Let's just keep it as it is. That's the same thing that we're doing with all the solo albums and side collaborations. It's actually just getting into a room and playing together and selecting the parts that work best. So we're sort of privileged in the way that we don't have to go into a studio. It's just the rehearsal space is a studio.
Estamos de regreso en este especial. Estamos platicando con Jakob de Causa Sui, el Paraiso Records, Edena Gardens y muchos proyectos más. Vamos a desmenuzar brevemente lo mejor que podamos esta entrevista, lo que llevamos hasta el momento. Le preguntamos un poco sobre los primeros días de Causa Sui, cómo se formó la banda, cómo era la escena psicodélica en Dinamarca en aquellos años. Dice que por ahí el 2013-2014, pues bueno, fue cuando se formó la banda. Antes Jonas y él, bueno, Jonas también toca en, eh, en Causa Sui, es parte del Paraiso Records y bueno, es el que tiene el estudio donde graban todos los últimos álbumes Causa Sui y bueno, otras bandas. Pero bueno, ellos tenían una banda de electrónica, pero estaba un poco aburrido, en vivo ya no era lo mismo, ya esa escena estaba media muerta. Y lo que sí había era un poquito de garage por ahí. Había una banda que se llamaba Baby Woodrows, que pues está bien chida, son bien legendarios. Y era como lo más que había, ¿no? No había mucha psicodelia en esos tiempos, no había mucho stoner. Dice que cuando ellos escucharon a Color Haze fue una gran inspiración, fue algo que les voló la cabeza. Y sin duda esto los inspiró para poder crear Causa Sui, la banda, hacer un revival de todo eso que escuchaban. Jimi Hendrix, Caius, esa escena stoner, de también pues, psicodélica de los 60s, de los 70s. Entonces, pues bueno, ellos decidieron tocar esto justo como parte de un revival porque no había muchas bandas, ¿no?, que estuvieran haciendo esto. Entonces, pues bueno, así inició el proyecto. Le preguntamos que cómo se sienten después de 17 años de carrera y dice que, pues bueno, se sienten muy relajados en este momento. Ahora viven en ciudades separadas, ya no viven tan juntos, no pueden ensayar como antes. Y pues para ellos pues no es como una presión, sino que cada quien vive su vida de manera diferente y cuando pueden pues bueno tocan, ensayan, componen y no hay ninguna presión. Dice que en este momento pues bueno por fortuna ya son una banda establecida y pues bueno pueden tomarse el tiempo necesario para descansar, hacer sus actividades y cuando se ven pues está en los mejores términos la banda. Disfrutan mucho lo que hacen ahora, no hay ninguna presión y pues bueno eso es como después de 17 años, pues bueno, obviamente creo que es muy merecido lo que, cómo viven estos muchachos. Y bueno, también la pregunta obligada es ¿cómo es el proceso de grabación y de composición de Causa Sui en términos generales? Dice que los primeros discos, pues bueno, no tenían un cuarto de ensayo como tal, no tenían un espacio donde pudieran componer como con una buena acústica, con un buen lugar, entonces pues bueno, era muy difícil, pero justamente cuando salió el disco Return to Sky, cuando hicieron las grabaciones de este disco, pues bueno, ellos se dividieron, se fueron a diferentes ciudades y pues bueno, Jonas empezó a construir un estudio y Jonas se dedica prácticamente a la producción de música. Entonces, pues bueno, ya la banda tuvo un espacio donde ensayar, un espacio donde grabar. Y pues bueno, esto fue algo muy significativo porque a partir de que tuvieron este espacio, pues bueno, pudieron pasar más tiempo en el estudio. Si estaban haciendo un jam, lo grababan. Si tienen alguna idea, rápidamente la capturaban. Y pues bueno, esto ayudó mucho a que la banda creciera, que la banda evolucionara. Entonces, pues bueno, el que tengan un estudio y un espacio donde ensayar, pues bueno, creo que es algo que definió totalmente a la banda. Y pues bueno, justamente en este periodo pues de Return to Sky pues también grabaron Vibraciones Doradas. Le preguntamos justo si había una conexión entre ambos discos y pues bueno, esto lo van a escuchar en el bloque que sigue de Vivas Palabras de Jacob. Pero bueno, él nos dice que sí hay una conexión entre Vibraciones Doradas y Return to Sky. Se grabaron en el mismo periodo de tiempo. De hecho, Vibraciones Doradas, pues bueno, fue primero antes que Return to Sky, aunque salió después. Pero pues bueno, en el mismo periodo de tiempo estaban componiendo como las canciones y algunas las ocuparon para el Return to Sky, otras para el Vibraciones Doradas que salió después. Y pues bueno, fue en su nuevo estudio en el que estaban trabajando, en el que ya Jonas tenía pues puesto todas sus inversiones, ¿no? Y pues bueno, no pasó tanto tiempo entre que salió un disco y otro, eso fue como muy chido, fue como en el mismo periodo de tiempo de creatividad que salieron estas canciones. Y pues bueno, finalmente también le preguntamos a Jacob acerca de su trabajo como ilustrador. Nos encantaría pues saber justamente qué lo inspira, qué técnicas usa para los discos que pues bueno son muy icónicos, las portadas de Causa Sui, de otras bandas como Papir, Mythic Sunship, todo lo que hace el Paraiso pues bueno él hace el arte. Y pues bueno él dice que no se considera como tal un artista visual, simplemente él trata de plasmar lo que los álbumes dicen, lo que los álbumes hablan, por decirlo de alguna forma. La parte visual es muy importante para Causa Sui, para él también. Es lo que representa, es la otra parte de la música. Tienes la música per se, pero si no tienes una buena tapa o no tienes un buen algo visual que te atrape, pues bueno, no dice nada la música, es como muy importante esta parte. Entonces él a través de su arte trata de plasmar lo que la música dice, ¿no? Lo que la música habla, por decirlo de alguna forma, de manera visual. Entonces, pues a él nunca le ha gustado la parte digital, dice que siempre ha preferido como algo más natural. Y pues bueno, lo que hace representa justamente esa naturalidad, esa parte orgánica de los discos. Entonces, pues bueno, siempre va a haber una conexión bastante fuerte entre la música y el arte. Siempre tiene que comunicar el arte algo, tiene que decir algo el arte. Y sé que esa era la magia de los discos de los 60 de los 70 también le pregunté si no le gustaría animar como estos artes que son increíbles. Y dice que en vivo pues tienen algunas grabaciones o tienen algunas animaciones que ponen detrás. De hecho, pues él nunca le gusta tocar con luces estrabodélicas ni con humo. Siente que tocar en vivo debe ser una experiencia más personal, luces bajas y tener estas animaciones de fondo y quizás eso pueda ser más increíble el viaje, ¿no? El trip. Así que pues bueno, vamos a escuchar esta última parte de la que hablamos, de su arte, justamente del Return to Sky y su nuevo, bueno, el estudio que tiene Jonas donde graba Causa Sui, de vivas palabras de Jakob. Ya regresamos aquí a Doom and Stone, espero se la estén pasando muy chido, estoy muy feliz de poder hacer este especial con una de mis bandas favoritas, de mis artistas visuales, también igual de mis disqueras favoritas. Estoy muy contento y espero ustedes también. Nos vemos en el siguiente bloque y por supuesto, gócela.
Hi, I'm Dave from Zulatron Records, Electric Moon, Zone 6, Intercosmos and Krautzone. And you're listening to Doomed and Stoned Latino America. Have a good time.
Wow, that's fantastic. And well, also, Vibraciones Doradas and Return to Sky are two of the most popular records, especially here in Latin America. So, some fans ask us if exists any connection between both albums or it's just each album for separately.
It actually is very much because some of the parts recorded for Vibraciones, that was actually done first. But then when we came to sequencing some of the tracks, we were, oh, these tracks are a bit too similar. And we sort of shuffled them around. So some of them had been lying for quite a while because they were actually recorded for Return to Sky. So yeah, there's an overlap in the material. Some of the tracks are recorded on the same days actually, but just on different albums. And that's the first two albums where we really tapped into the new studio and we spend a lot of time getting the sound right and playing with headphones and without headphones and moving amps around and doing crazy overdubs. So I think they are very produced in the sense that that we actually we recorded a lot of it in layers in the studio, but we still had like the live feeling that the bass and the drums was always live and a lot of the guitars as well. But then we sort of changed it afterwards. So that's a lot of time went into those albums. So yeah, they're definitely connected.
Wow, it's very interesting because you have the chance to stay a lot of time in the studio and you can create, you can experiment with different sounds, instruments, and not all the bands have that opportunity. The bands just have maybe 1, 2, 3 days to record an album and that's it. So for me, that's very special that you have this possibility, and thanks to that, you create this masterpiece. So, well, now I want to talk about your work as illustrator. So you are the mastermind behind the artwork of Causa Sui and some other iconic albums released by El Paraiso Records. What are your inspiration for the concept, if they have any specific meaning, and what technique do you use?
Oh, I think that I think that I don't really think of myself that much as like a visual artist. I mean, the only visual art I do is actually for the albums. It's not like I have a lot of stuff I do otherwise or for other bands or work wise. But I think it was something we found out very early in our career that we had to control the visual side of our albums. So that's the same reason why Jonas learned how to produce really well and record albums, because we didn't think that most albums actually sounded good. We thought that most albums sound too sterile. And the same way, I didn't really like the way that most album covers look, especially in the early zeros. It was like a very digital aesthetic. And we always thought we needed a more like earthly vibe. So I learned enough to sort of do the first album covers and have just been doing them since. But I don't think that like the artist should stand in the way of the album. So it's, for me, it's about enhancing the vibe on the album and the title and whatever concept we come up with to sort of communicate that in a visual way. So I don't think that it should be like a separate thing. I think it should be more of like a book cover or something that sort of draws you in. And also, I think it's okay if it actually changes over time. That's what I like about a lot of like 70s album or 60s albums. They have different covers depending on what country you're in. And I think that makes perfect sense to sort of say, okay, but the album cover is important to drawing people into the music and enhancing the music, but it's not like a piece of art in itself. It's more like, it's more like something that sort of sells the actual content that is the music.
Have you ever think to animate the cover artworks? I mean, listen to the record and maybe create animation. It will be amazing. I mean, I really love to play your albums in the dark and maybe with some lights, and I love to see the artwork, and it's really amazing. I got it. What you say? What artwork is very important for an album? It's the other part, the other half of the band of the album, of course.
Yeah, I mean, but it's a different medium, right? So I did some videos of some of the albums that sort of have like more like slow moving waves and underwater themes, but like where it's more cinema style. So I think that like animating the covers themselves would be like a third thing. And also I'm not, again, really that talented in the graphic that I think that I could pull it off without making it look too like digital. But I think that you can do something like video wise, that as I do our visuals, which is pretty important thing when we play. I can always feel if we haven't had the visuals, we never play as good a show. So we have some visuals, but they're totally different than the artwork because they're more based on light. It's more shapes moving around and stuff flickering to sort of bring the listener in, not to be a movie in itself. It wouldn't make sense to just watch it, but when you see it on a backdrop, it actually creates a whole light show. So I always tell people to not play with like the lights and the smoke that some people do, but just have like very mellow lighting and just let the backdrop draw the listener in. And it's a different format and I like it, but it's it works in the same.
I love the same concept. Just close your eyes and see the band, or maybe if the projection is behind, don't care about the band. It's more the visuals. Enjoy the trip. It's more like that. Regresamos a este especial aquí en Doom and Stone Latinoamérica. Estamos platicando con Jakob de la banda Causa Sui, Edena Gardens, el Paraiso Records y bueno, muchos proyectos más. Le cuestionamos ahora sobre la disquera El Paraiso Records y pues bueno, le preguntamos cómo fue que nació este proyecto, una de las disqueras más importantes de la psicodelia a nivel mundial. Y pues bueno, nos dice que ellos con Causa Suya habían trabajado con algunos sellos alemanes como Nasonic, como Electro Hash, que es Stefan de Color Haze. Pero pues bueno, también era un reto trabajar con ellos, a veces era un poco frustrante porque pues bueno, tardaban en sacar los discos y a pesar de que les dieron como la libertad creativa para las tapas, para el arte, pues bueno, no tenían mucho control en la distribución, en cuándo iban a salir los discos y demás cosas. Entonces, por eso pues decidieron también tener el control y fundaron este sello, el Paraiso Records justamente, y pues bueno, ahora tienen el control de las ediciones, las reediciones, de su misma música, si quieren sacar algún material de alguno de los integrantes o bandas con las que trabajan, entonces pues bueno, ellos tienen más control y eso es algo muy importante para Jacob y para Jonas, justamente que son los dueños de El Paraiso Records. Y pues bueno, también dice que cuando empezaron a trabajar, sobre todo Jonas, con bandas como Papir, pues bueno, no había dónde acomodarlas y pues decidieron lanzar la música a través del sello y bueno, pronto esto se fue convirtiendo pues como en una gran familia y pues bueno, eso ha ayudado a que el sello se fortalezca. Una de las cosas más importantes que también deben de saber ustedes como audiencia es la calidad de los discos que lanza el Paraíso es hermosa. La verdad es que siempre compramos un vinilo, un CD y pues bueno, están medios feas las ediciones, solo es el cartón y ya no. Aquí tiene un obi, que es como esta apartado que es japonés, ya saben que le ponen los japoneses como a los vinilos, pues bueno, ahí viene como un obi, ahí viene información extra, la verdad es que los acabados de la tapa, pues bueno, son increíbles, son mate a veces, son como de cartón así bien bonito, como si fuera serigrafía, son numerados, están increíbles las ediciones en pocas palabras y eso también es algo importante porque cuando gastas una cantidad considerable de dinero en un disco, quieres tener algo bonito y ellos ofrecen eso y creo que esa es una de las cosas más chidas que tiene este sello, el Paraiso Records. Bueno, también le vamos a cuestionar a Jacob, que lo van a escuchar ahorita, de su viva voz, cómo ha sido trabajar de solista, cómo ha sido tener el control y si es diferente de trabajar con Causa Sui. Él nos dice en pocas palabras que es increíble tener esta libertad creativa, que su primer disco lo grabó cuando llegaba temprano a las sesiones donde grabaron Return to Sky y Vibraciones Doradas y empezó como a llamear y de repente pues esas ideas fueron evolucionando y se dio cuenta que tenía algo muy especial, era un acercamiento diferente al sonido, no era lo que sonaba Causa Sui, entonces él quiso terminar esas canciones, ir como en sesiones y al final pues bueno, eso es lo que parte de la magia, ¿no? De tener el estudio, de la libertad creativa y de poder tener como el sello al mismo tiempo, ¿no? Esta posibilidad que te da de hacer mil cosas con mil proyectos, lo que te venga a la mente, y eso es algo muy chido que pues que aprecia y que de lo cual se siente como muy alegre y afortunado también. Y pues bueno, también le preguntamos sobre el Paraiso Records si alguna vez lo verá como un colectivo, dice que sí, que en realidad pues esa era la idea principal del sello, ser como un colectivo, invitar a músicos que ellos consideran que son chidos, que son buena onda, a que echen jams y pues bueno, involucrar a más y más gente a este sello. Dice que desafortunadamente pues bueno, todos tienen familia y que no tienen el tiempo necesario, pero ha funcionado bastante bien. De sus últimos lanzamientos fue el San Diego Sessions, donde Jonas Moog se fue a San Diego, justamente Estados Unidos, a trabajar con varios músicos. Y pues bueno, salió estos jams increíbles, ¿no? Entonces, pues bueno, vamos a escuchar esta última parte de viva voz de Jacob. Nos quedan dos bloques más, ya regresamos aquí a su Doom and Stone y por supuesto ya se la sabe, gócela.
Hello, it's me, Beran from Samabayo, and you're listening to Doom and Stone Latin America.
And well, now talking about El Paraiso Records, how the label was born and what's the approach or criteria to sign bands?
Yeah, I think that we had some experiences with different German labels, and I thought that our main frustration was always that it took a very long time for them to get the records out. So it was actually not to like, we wanted to own like the visuals, and the German labels actually let us do that. We was on Sony and Electrohash, and they said, oh, you can just do the artwork. We're like, wow, that's amazing. We never heard about that before. But it took for ages to get it done because they had other releases. And also they weren't that keen on always repressing old stuff. So we wanted to be in control of that. And we quickly found out that other labels, other people were interested in like joining us. We just always imagined it as a way for Causa Sui and related projects. But then Jonas were producing Papier, and we found out that we couldn't really find a label for them, or they couldn't find a label. And we said, oh, we could just put it out and it would be out like in 2 months. And they said, okay, let's just do that. And we hurried up and released it. But I mean, we never intended it on actually like signing that many bands. And we've cut back on releasing bands that we're not directly involved in ourselves. Even stuff that is produced by one of us is like not necessarily going on El Paraiso next, because we want to do our own projects, and that's the idea. It was born from not to be a label that sort of have a lot of bands that we are not directly connected to.
And I really appreciate and I love the presentation of the records too. I have some few here. Yeah, you sent it to Mexico, and the quality is just amazing. I really enjoy this. How do you say in Japanese, the obis? The obis, yeah. It's really amazing, because usually the record labels just release an album and it's just, nothing special. But here you put a lot of things. The material, the obi, the colors, the quality. So I really love, and for me, that's why El Paraiso Records is one of the major labels in psychedelia around the world. I mean, this is a personal opinion, of course, but I love the record label.
Great, thanks.
Yeah, you're welcome. I really enjoy your solo albums. It's so amazing that you combine jazz, electronic music, and psychedelia. It's super. So tell us how it's working on your own, and what things are different from a band format.
Yeah, it's a lot of the time, it was also actually born from moving into the studio, and I just figured out, I have my drum kit in the studio. I mean, I live like 100 miles away from the studio, so I have to go by train. So when I'm there, I'm like usually very focused. Like my first solo album, or one of their solo albums with drums, that was actually a day that I just came over early, and we were recording the stuff for Return to Sky and Vibraciones, and we sort of I just had a couple of extra hours, and I just have brought like some basic synthesizer lines. I didn't really know what I was going to record, and I just recorded for a few hours, and when I came home I was like, well, this sounds really good. I have to like finish these tracks. So I sort of built the tracks on top of the drums, but I didn't really have an idea of where it was going. So yeah, it was like that jazz approach where you just like improvise over like a modal or a theme, and you just add layers on top of that until you feel like it's finished. So yeah, it's much more open-ended than Causa Sui, where we usually like make tracks and record them and sort of bring it into that. But yeah, so I had an idea of the style I wanted to play, but it was it was actually pretty much just playing around with all the stuff that I couldn't fit into a Causa Sui album, but yeah, in a different approach. And that's part of El Paraiso, that it had that it has that we like is generating new projects on its own, the label. That's one of the things I like the best about it, is that, sometimes people will say, oh, I recorded this album because I have these ideas that could fit with El Paraiso. And it was like, well, no, we wouldn't even have done these albums if we hadn't had the label. We wouldn't even have thought about it. But now it's like, oh, it makes sense to play with like a flute player from London, because then we can put out like an astral jazz record with, even though it's Causa Sui playing on the album, we can call it something else, right? So stuff like that just have fly off in different directions. So it's sort of open-ended. Yeah.
Do you think in some point El Paraiso Records will be more like a collective? I mean, it will bring musicians from different parts around the world and record some jams like the San Diego sessions?
Yeah, I mean, I hope so. I know that Jonas, when he went there, I was actually supposed to go as well, but I couldn't go in the end. But I mean, we are pretty closely connected to like some of the scenes. I don't know how many of. I know that some of the people in San Diego are still playing, but you know, they haven't really been touring as much. But we always talked about if they came by, we should record some sessions with them. So I think it's everyone who like plays on some of the albums or whatever. You know, if we record, if they come by, we will probably record something with them. So yeah, that's it. It is sort of a collective, but it's like controlled because me and Jonas are doing all the artwork and distribution and like handling it. So usually we're involved ourselves in it one way or another. And we haven't had a lot of time to set up sessions, but it was actually one of the reasons we started it was to let's do a lot of sessions with the musicians we think are cool whenever they're traveling to Denmark, and just release them as well. But it's surprisingly hard to set up because you know they have to have a place to stay, and everyone has kids and are going around full-time jobs and stuff. So, I mean, for me, it's sort of a hobby that's spiraled out of control.
Estamos de vuelta aquí en Doom and Stone Latinoamérica. Espero se le estén pasando al máximo. Les recordamos nuestras redes sociales para estar en contacto. Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, Doom and Stone Latinoamérica. Sacamos una nueva compilación con 100 canciones de este 2022. Vayan a nuestro Bandcamp, doomandstonelatinoamerica.bandcamp.com. Está gratuita, 100 canciones para todos ustedes, nuestro regalo de Navidad para toda la pandilla. Gracias por habernos mantenido otro año en este maravilloso proyecto. Vamos a continuar con esta entrevista con nuestro invitado Jakob desde Dinamarca. Por supuesto, yo creo y soy muy ferviente fan de este tipo de sonidos, stoner, doom, psicodelia, todo lo ha llegado. Y creo que vivimos en una época pues dorada de la música prácticamente. Entonces, pues bueno, le planteamos esta idea a Jakob y él nos dice que también él cree que es una buena época para la música. En los 70s pues obviamente no existía como tal el underground, porque pues si no te firmaba un label grande pues no había dónde ir, no había mucho control creativo de las tapas, del sonido, de todas las ideas, a menos de que fueras David Bowie o algo así, alguien gigante. Entonces pues bueno, ahora tenemos una increíble escena, tenemos la oportunidad de tener la tecnología en nuestras manos. Imagínense, pues hoy es tan fácil en una computadora pues hacer todo, ¿no? Ni siquiera necesitas un instrumento, todo lo haces en la computadora y pues bueno, tienes la libertad creativa, tienes el control de la distribución, de la tapa, del arte, de todo. Es increíble el tiempo en el que estamos viviendo y pues bueno, esto es lo que nos dice también Jakob, que pues bueno, quizás ahora lo que sigue es aprender a dominar los instrumentos, aprender a utilizar bien esas herramientas. Hay que tener disciplina, si bien todos tenemos acceso hay que saberlo utilizar de la mejor forma. Entonces pues bueno, eso creo que es un gran consejo. Y pues bueno, el otro lado también nos dice que este tipo de música pues bueno es para gente pues mayor de 20 años, yo creo, para gente grande, dice él. No conoce jóvenes que escuchen este tipo de música y él está un poco perdido en el tema del underground, de la escena local. Dice que no tiene tiempo de ir a conciertos, obviamente su trabajo, su familia es lo más importante. Y pues bueno, la pregunta que todos la del millón decimos por ahí, ¿no? Si van a venir a Estados Unidos o a Sudamérica, Latinoamérica alguna vez. Causa Sui dice que hace muchos años él y Jonas fueron a Chicago cuando tenían su banda de electrónica, pero que es muy difícil que ellos puedan venir como Causa Sui por el tema de la logística. Trabajan, tienen familia y pues bueno, es un tema muy difícil poder traer sus instrumentos, los permisos. Entonces él cree que va a estar muy complicado que alguna vez puedan venir a Estados Unidos o a Latinoamérica. Así que pues bueno, hay que juntar nuestros pesos, nuestros oros para poder ir a ver a Causa Sui. Vamos a escuchar esta última parte de viva voz de Jakob. Ya regresamos para despedir este especial aquí en Doom and Stone. Cósela.
Hey, this is Chris Peters from Grado. You're listening to Doomed and Stoned Latin America. Muchas gracias.
It's a really interesting. Well, this is more like opinion as fan that you have all this freedom to create tons of music and also bring musicians from around the world. I think we are living the golden era for this kind of sound, psychedelic, space rock, stoner sounds. Everybody talk about the 70s and says, oh, the 70s, the 60s were the best, but now we are living the golden era. We have amazing bands like Color Haze, like you guys, Rotor, Papir, Airless in the United States. So it's really amazing. Well, talking about this, Denmark is an important place for modern stoner space psychedelia. So can you tell us a little bit can you tell us a little bit about how is the local scene now these days? And can you recommend us some bands, please?
Oh, yeah. Yeah, I'm probably not that well familiar with it, but yeah, I totally agree that like the scene today is so much. I mean, in the 60s and 70s, you didn't really have an underground, right? If you had, it was just your friends playing somewhere. You didn't have anyone releasing music that weren't on like a decent sized label. And also like people couldn't hear each other. What were they doing? And so it was very localized. Like you didn't have like an Afrobeat influence in stone in like psychedelic rock, and you didn't have like a jazz influence in whatever blues or whatever was going on. It was very local and very like mainstream driven, and I think all those musicians dreamed about having like the freedom that we have today, where you can just sit down with a computer and you can record and produce a whole album and make the artwork. I mean, like the tools we have today is just, it still blows my mind sometimes that I can have a laptop and I can just produce like a whole ensemble on it with everything. I don't need any other gear than that, just like a sound card and obviously like some stuff to record it, but it blows my mind that we can do what we can today. So I think that's like a main driver, and I wish like more bands would take more control of like the whole aesthetic. The whole thing about going into a studio and having someone record, unless you really like the person's sound, why wouldn't you try to learn how to do it yourself? Because you can actually get that like perfect sound that you're aiming for, if you work for it. It's the same way you're practicing your instrument, right? It takes years to learn, but once you're like proficient in it, you'll be able to use it much more creatively. But in terms of like local music, I don't really know. Besides the bands that we've like put out, if there are any, I've mostly don't have that much time to go to concerts and stuff. So I'm actually a bit lost in the whole Danish music scene. But I know that there's a lot of bands, but like I don't think there are that many young people who are like into this type of music. It's more like people in their they're definitely older than 18, and they're probably in their 20s as well, right? So yeah, I don't know about if maybe there's gonna come a new generation that's gonna pick up the gauntlet in some way, but I haven't heard that many new bands. Yeah.
It's well, you told us an amazing advice. I mean, learn by yourself how to record, practice a lot. That's the key, because in these days it's very easy to get access to an amplifier, a guitar, I mean, different effects on the computer, synthesizer, etc. But nobody knows how to use it properly. You know what I mean? It's that's why your advice is very, very
You
amazing.
definitely have to make a lot of mistakes, right? Because that's like, I mean, like I know that we haven't put out our first album, which a lot of people would probably like. It had vocals on it, but I know Jonas isn't that keen on the production, so I think that he wishes it sounded differently. But I think that's just some of the learnings you have to make. Like you have to say, oh, maybe we shouldn't have recorded the drum kit with just 2 mics. We should probably have had like a mic on the snare drum or the bass drum, because you can't really feel the boom in it. But that's just some of the stuff that you have to try it out for yourself, and I think that you can relatively easy find something the same way that you do all other things, and the tools are just so valuable. So definitely.
That's amazing. And well, do you have any plans with Causa Sui or any other project to come to United States or Latin America? Everybody's waiting for you guys.
Oh man, I wish. Me and Jonas were there once in Chicago with an electronic project, and we played with some jazz musicians. But I mean, bringing the whole band over, I think it's going to be very, very tough. For one thing, we're not like really that keen on touring. We just play a few shows now and then because we have all the other stuff going on. So we never really toured. And I think going there, it would mainly be to actually play with some of the people and record rather than touring. So I think it would be fun to come over and play with some people and make new albums, but just hang out. But I don't think we'll actually go on tour. I don't think that it's possible to sort of it'll be hard in many ways.
Yeah, I can imagine. I think it's the same for other bands like Lord Rider or Color Haze, Rotor, even Rotor. It's really complicated to come to United States or Latin America. But well, we need to go to see you guys to Europe. Is the only way.
It would be fun, but I don't know. I don't even know where you'd start with something like that. I just remember the headache we had the last time. We had to get the green cards, and everything sorted, and it was just, we didn't even bring any instruments, so it was still like, I don't know, it'll be very tough to I don't know that many bands who've done it, actually. Like, I've heard of a few, and like you say, it's the logistics is pretty grueling. Like, even, I don't know, the Ravenettes or someone like the big Danish bands who's been sort of popular, then you hear about it and it's just like staying 5 people in a motel room, and like I don't think that they were I don't think anyone sort of cracked the code of how to do it, but yeah.
Mange tak skal I have. Virkelig fedt, at I er kommet til det her.
Regresamos para decir adiós en este especial con Jakob de El Paraiso Records, Causa Sui, Edena Gardens y bueno, muchos proyectos más. Me tardaría un ratísimo en enumerarlos, pero bueno, espero se la pasen muy bien. Este fue nuestra entrevista antes de Navidad y pues bueno, vamos a escuchar la última parte de esta charla amena, una de mis favoritas, un sueño cumplido para mí. La verdad es que escuchen Causa Sui, El Paraiso Records, vayan a YouTube o por supuesto a Spotify y ahí pueden encontrar todo lo del Paraiso Records, Causa Sui, Papir, Edena Gardens, sus proyectos de solistas de Jonas Mook, las San Diego Sessions, Mythic Sonship, Futuro Paco, bueno, muchísimas bandas increíbles las van a poder encontrar ahí y si pueden comprar los discos, pues bueno, lo pueden hacer directamente en elparaisorecords.com. Ahí está disponible de manera física, en vinil, en CD o en digital. Y pues bueno, en esta última parte le preguntamos justamente este nuevo proyecto, Edena Gardens, que pues bueno, son los miembros de Papir con los de Causa Sui. Y él nos dice que Causa Sui no estaba tocando, no estaba grabando nada, así que pues él tenía este gusanito de hacer algo nuevo. Y pues bueno, hecho unos jams con Niklas, que es de Papir. Y pues bueno, ellos habían tocado en vivo de cierta forma, habían hecho jams, pero no de una forma propia, ¿no? Entonces lo invitó a que tocaran juntos. Y pues bueno, salieron estos jams de forma natural, lo invitó, tocaron. Y pues bueno, esto se quedó en la primera toma. Esto es lo que escuchan, es la magia. No hay estudio mágico, no hay nada más. Dice que los solos, pues bueno, están chidos, pero que este álbum no iba a ser de solos, de virtuosismo, iba a ser de jam, del feeling, ¿no? Entonces se nota perfectamente este maravilloso disco de Edena Gardens, lo pueden escuchar. Estuvo hace dos programas, o hace un programa en nuestros lanzamientos del 2022, escúchenlo por ahí también. Hicimos varios especiales sobre lanzamientos en lo que va del año. Y pues bueno, estas tomas fueron las que están ahí en el disco. Dice que tienen un disco en vivo que va a salir muy pronto, así que estén al pendientes en el Paraiso Records. Espero, se está maquilando esto, está en producción, pero bueno, pronto saldrá al público. Y pues bueno, finalmente nos va a decir algunos de sus jazzistas y músicos favoritos. Ahí usted ponga atención, pluma y papel. No arruinemos la sorpresa, se los voy a dejar ahí. Gracias por habernos acompañado en este especial. Nos vemos muy pronto. Nos queda una entrevista con Sixteen, con Atomic Vulture. Y con eso vamos a cerrar este año. Gracias por mantenernos al aire. Escuchen nuestras entrevistas en YouTube, Spotify, Spreaker, Doom and Stone Latinoamérica. Nos vemos pronto. Cósela.
This is Tommy from Far Flung, and you're listening to Doomed and Stoned Latin America.
Well, also, you formed a super group called Edena Gardens with the guys of Papir. So tell us about this new adventure and your new album.
Yeah, that was again like like Causa Sui weren't playing any shows and wasn't recording anything new, and everybody was busy doing other things. And I thought all these solo albums I've done, the most annoying thing is that I can't really go out and play live because it's just me. So I just reached out to Martin, who had played with a bunch of times, and I never really played with Niklas from Papir. Sometimes he was playing guitar on as a guest on Causa Sui shows when we were doing something special, but I never really played just with him. And I thought, oh, that's like you say, it's a collective, and we should invite each other. So I sort of went into just asked him, could you guys come here for one day and we could try playing some swamped out music that could actually be fun to play live. And that was sort of the idea, to play something that was sort of not that energetic, but energetic enough to play it live. So that it was just one day in the studio recording, and then I cut it together afterwards, and I said, I think we actually have enough for an album. And the others agreed, and that was the album. So again, it wasn't something that we just said, oh, let's play a tune that sounds like this. All the stuff in the albums is just like first takes, but it worked out really well, and we actually started playing some of it live, and we're playing the tracks on the album, and we're like, oh, we can just play them in a different way because it's improvised anyway. So we have a second album that we also recorded, and actually our first live show we will also put out, because it's to show like, what do these tracks actually sound live? They're actually quite different. So we have a live album that has 3 tracks on it, and one of them is like 17 minutes long. That's just a fun thing to play. So yeah, that'll be out hopefully. It's being pressed right now.
And it's a really fantastic album. I really enjoyed it. It's the first tape, so it's not studio magic there. So it is what it is. So it's very honest, and I really love that. It's their pure sound.
Thanks. Yeah, that was the idea, to not just overthink it, but like, we know so many improvised bands, but I think that a lot of them are just playing a lot of guitar solos. And we were like, well, what if we did an album that it wasn't that was improvised, but it wasn't based on guitar solos? There are 2 guitars and drums, like a baritone guitar and a regular guitar and the drums. And it was like, well, sort of fun to have 2 guitars not play solos, but just play like soundscapes and drones and like strange sounds. So yeah, on the new one we played like, there's some free jazz in there as well, and some like really loose stuff. So it's sort of fun how far you can take the concept. So it's just to go with the flow. That was the idea of it.
So we left just a few minutes, so probably this is the last question. If you have favorite jazz, how to say in English, jazzist, and also electronic players, if you have some favorite, maybe Kraftwerk or I don't know, something like that.
Like only electronic music?
Electronic and jazz, yeah.
Like, I mean, like Manuel Götzing, Asra, he just passed away yesterday. So I was listening to his music again for the first time in I think over a year, like 2 days ago. So I was like, wow, this is so amazing. And I was supposed to play a solo show with him, but I wasn't really ready to play solo because I knew it was going to be sold out. But now I'm like, damn, I should have played with Manuel Götzing because he's just so amazing. Like the way he played guitar and sort of invented like the sort of repeating minimalist German music. It's just, he's amazing. Like Azra Temple and Manuel Götzing, that's probably what I'm listening to most these days, right? It's a way of playing guitar that doesn't really sound like he's playing guitar. And I think it's still very, very unique that he can do that, like create those rhythmical patterns and that way. So
Yeah,
keep it.
totally agree. Well, Jacob, thank you so much for joining us in this interview. We really appreciate. I'm going to translate this to Spanish because we want to the people know more about all your projects, where the people can get your music.
Oh yeah, it's if they have like Spotify or YouTube or whatever, it's a great place to just check it out. And other than that, I think it can be ordered from some places in Latin America. I know that Forced Exposure distributes it, and otherwise you can pay the hefty price of ordering it from the El Paraiso website, and Jonas will have packed your package with personal love and care and stickers.